When it comes to your retirement, do you want to have the same old plan everyone else has? Of course not. You're unique and have your own goals and dreams. Don't be treated just like a number. This is your retirement. So it's time to think differently. And you're in luck because you've found the Retire Your Way podcast with ILG Financial. At ILG Financial, you won't find generic, run-of-the-mill plans containing the same old cookie-cutter solutions. Dave, Chase, and the ILG Financial team focus on building one retirement at a time using their Think Differently philosophy. And that means your own comprehensive plan with customized solutions built to achieve just one goal, yours. So put on your Think Differently hats and get ready to take back control of your retirement today and for all the tomorrows to come. ILG Financial's Retire Your Way podcast was created just for you, and it's starting right now.
Thank you for joining us on the Retire Your Way podcast. I'm Ron Stutz along with Chase Lopez, and the average American burns 75% of their monthly spending on just four things. We're going to talk about that in just a moment here, but let me just say that it's all here on this podcast. It's all about helping you plan for retirement your way so you can achieve your financial goals, income, legacy, growth. We talk about all of that, and if you want to get in touch with ILG Financial, you can call 540-720-5656. That's 540-720-5656. Or, of course, go online to ilgfinancial.com to learn more. But, Chase, I was talking about the average American with their expenses. They spend about 75% of their monthly income on just four things. And we're going to dig into the average spending for a retiree in America and how to make sure you're still able to save or even maybe cut some expenses. Let's talk about that, Chase. First of all, how you doing today?
Doing great. I think this will be kind of a good topic for us to touch on here, Ron.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is sometimes on the podcast, we, as you know, we can get a little technical with, rules and, investments and things like that. Today is going to be more broad and more general, which I think makes it apply to, some more folks, right?
Well, specifically for retirees, monthly expenses, earnings, spending to retirement. Tell us all about what the average American does. And, a lot of people always get consumed with, keeping up with the Joneses and all that kind of thing and making sure that they're, average or that they fit in or whatever the case may be. But launch into that conversation if you would.
Yeah, so the average American, the average 65-year-old American, they earn an annual pre-tax amount of $55,335. Mm-hmm. That same group spends about $52,000 a year on the four things that we're going to talk about today. So that's almost 95% of the money that they're bringing in. They're spending on these four items. So there's not necessarily a lot of extra cash for unexpected expenses, emergencies or anything like that.
That's pretty close margin for sure.
It is. And to boot, the average American in that same age group has about $200,000 in retirement savings and might still need to continue to work due to those high expenses. So one thing that we talk about a lot here on the podcast, Ron, and I'm sure as you've done them all with us, I'm sure you can kind of agree with this, is when you're looking out to retirement, this kind of drives the point home that you definitely want to get a very good handle on what your expenses are, what you're going to be spending in retirement, and be able to plan that out for the next, 20 or 30 years of your retirement, because the margins can be so tight.
This does not mean that Chase Lopez and Dave Lopez are going to put you on a strict budget. When you talk to ILG Financial, it's not about that at all. You just have to have a plan to know exactly where you are, what you're spending and how much you need and that sort of thing, because it's really a close margin there.
That's right. And to your point, Ron, we're not saying that you have to be eating ramen noodles every day of retirement, right? Well, what we're really talking about here is just being able to, because for a lot of folks, while they're working, money's coming in, money's going out. They know that they're making enough to pay the bills. But once we hit retirement and you're on that fixed income, you want to be crystal clear as to what those expenses are. And really four main categories are what you're going to be spending most of your money on. So you want to be able to at least quantify those four categories. So the first one is housing. right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether you rent, whether you own a home, right? Whether you own your home outright, even if you own your home outright, there's still expenses tied to that, right? You have property taxes. You have to have upkeep with the home, right?
Sure.
If you have a mortgage, you have to pay off the mortgage. So home costs account for about 36% of a retiree's annual expenses, and it can be one of the largest expensive for folks in retirement. A potential solution, right, is to cut down some of these costs would be to downsize, right? Now, that's a little bit difficult now. We're talking in September of 2024, and housing prices remain pretty high. So that can be a tough thing to do, right?
Yeah, a lot of people decide to downsize, and then the smaller home that they want to go to is going to cost them, even more than what they're living in now. So that same kind of logic doesn't always work these days.
I know. Especially with, again, we're talking on September of 2024 right now, but with interest rates being so high, right, that just kind of doubles the effect there, right, of those higher prices. But if you end up selling your current home at a profit and you end up, being able to downsize, right, and able to, get into a lower cost home, you can store away some of those profits to either, pay off debt, you can stash it away for retirement, or, boost your emergency fund.
Are there any drawbacks to this kind of thinking? I mean, I think I just kind of touched on it just a moment ago, accidentally.
No, but you're thinking on the right track, right? So the downside could be you might still have to pay a high price for the new house, right? Or the new condo, wherever you're living at. So the replacement home, based on the current market, might end up being the same price or a higher price. So, what you could also consider, right? And remember, everyone's situation is a little bit different. But one thing people can consider is possibly relocating to a less expensive area, right, than where they're currently living.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different options there, as is the theme with most of our conversations here. Definitely get with your financial professional to look at your specific situation to see if you can, adjust that housing cost, at all.
Okay, so we talked about 4 different main categories, and that takes care of housing. But what are some of the other categories that folks are spending all this money on?
Yeah, so another one that a lot of people don't actually think about is transportation costs, right? So it really kind of depends on where you live. So if you live in a more rural area, I guess you could say, you might do a lot more driving than someone that lives in a more suburban or urban area. So gas prices, right? That's a cost that you have to incur. If you own a car, as I'm sure you know, Ron, there are repairs and expenses that have to go with a car, right?
Oh, yeah. Just went through some of that.
Yeah. So, if something happens to the car, you're going to have to pay for it to continue using your transportation. Transportation, surprisingly, makes up about $7,100 of annual expenses for a retiree, right? So you got car insurance, maintenance costs, gasoline to gas up the car, assuming that you still have a gas car when you're listening to this.
These days.
I know. So one thing to consider, right? If you're a couple or if you're single, right? Sometimes folks will have multiple vehicles, right? They maybe over time gathered, multiple vehicles. The idea there is, hey, if you don't necessarily need 2 or 3 vehicles and you're not having to commute to work every day, it may be advantageous for you to, much like downsizing the house, downsizing your vehicle fleet to maybe only 1 or 2 vehicles.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly a lot of people, a lot of couples at that stage in their life, decide to share a vehicle. And that's a lot cheaper because you don't have to pay to insure 2 vehicles. I mean, it's kind of a simple concept, really. But I guess, there's a big push these days toward taking public transit. And, as you said, if you're living in a rural area, that's rather difficult. But if you're in an urban area, I mean, that may be a really strong consideration to make.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to say this a couple more times, but I think it's good for the listeners to hear, Ron, which is everyone's situation is different, right? But if you go to your financial professional and you say, hey, I think I can make some cuts here on my transportation costs, what they should be able to do is quantify that for you, right? So if it's, hey, we're downsizing from 3 cars to 1 car, 3 cars to 2 cars, what your financial professional should be able to help you out with is, okay, how much are we going to be saving by doing that? To your point with the public transportation, your financial professional should be able to walk through what that would kind of look like from a cost perspective, and then that will help you get a better handle on, your overall plan.
After housing and transportation, another thing that we talk about a lot on this show, and everybody talks about this a lot, and a lot of people just really worry about it, is the cost of health care. It's not getting any cheaper, and health care, especially when you're older, is going to cost a lot of money, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny, we hear on the news, we hear about inflation, right? They'll say, hey, inflation's at, 3%, whatever it's at any given time. The reality is when they look at inflation and you get that nice round number that you look at in the news, it's a combination of a bunch of things, right? It's a combination of housing costs, costs of cars, costs of food, costs of healthcare, costs of, everything is all kind of bundled together, and they make it an average, right? Now, an average is going to have things that are higher than that 3% number and things that are lower than that 3% number. Healthcare historically is always inflates, or the price of healthcare always goes up at a higher rate than most other things. So it drags that average up a little bit. So to your
point,
much
higher rate than inflation, for sure.
Right. So if you're looking at inflation and it says 3%, you could probably bank on healthcare, your healthcare costs going up maybe 5 to 6%, over that same time frame. So it's 100% something that a cost, one of the big four, as we're kind of talking about here, a cost that retirees have to factor into their plan. Health spending makes up, about, and again, this is an average as well, but about $7,000 in annual spending for retirees. So there's a couple of things that you can kind of do to mitigate that. The first is become intimately familiar with your specific health insurance plan, right? So if you're on Medicare, do you also have a Medicare supplement plan? How does that supplement plan interact with your Medicare? So you want to be very, very familiar with what's covered, what's not covered. And, to that end, a lot of people don't know this, Ron. It's kind of hidden in a lot of those health insurance plans. But a lot of those health insurance plans, they offer some services that are preventative in nature that you may not be aware of. So maybe they say, hey, they will help you out with a nutrition plan to help with your health. Even an exercise plan sometimes. Some health insurance carriers will provide an exercise plan. So a lot of that preventative stuff, if you do that on the front end, and I'm no physical trainer or anything like that, but from what I've been told, if you take care of it on the front end, then it'll help you kind of on the back end.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I always thought of you as being very athletic and svelte and all that sort of thing. But
well, I appreciate that.
It's not normally one of your services, I know. So that's the third one. That's healthcare. We've talked about housing, transportation, healthcare, and then one that we all have to be concerned about, no matter how old we are. Everybody has to eat, and folks spend a lot of money, a high percentage of their income, whatever that may be, on food. That has a huge impact on your life.
Oh, absolutely. And the food conversation, it's a little bit different than the first three that we talked about in the sense that, or maybe housing's similar, but we absolutely need food, right? I don't really know how to put it any other way than that, Ron.
Can't do without it.
Right. Exactly. So food can account for over 12% of folks' annual expenses per year. So, there's a couple of things that you can do there to help keep that within a certain allotment. Now, as a reminder, everyone's a little bit different, right? And specifically, when you're talking to your financial professional, a lot of times on this show, we talk about goals, right? Hey, what are your goals? What do you want your retirement to look like? One of the things that is baked into that equation, I guess you could say,
there's a food reference right there.
Yeah, there we go. No pun intended, right?
Yep.
So the baked into that is, hey, do you like to go out to eat, right? Do you go out to eat, once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week? Is that going to be feasible in retirement, right? So you want to stick to, hey, if we're thinking we're going to go out 3 or 4 times a week for, call it lunch and dinner, we want to kind of stick to that because we're going to be on a fixed income in retirement, whatever your kind of number is. When you're doing your groceries, the price of groceries is largely out of our control. So that's something that you want to kind of keep up to date with your financial professional and say, hey, I'm spending about X amount on groceries every week, and then revisit that often and make adjustments accordingly to your plan based on how those prices are moving.
And Chase, I've heard it said that you should never go grocery shopping on an empty stomach.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Sounds like good advice.
Well, I'll tell you what. That's what my wife always tells me when we're going to the grocery store, because if we do go hungry, then you better believe I'm going to be getting all the snacks and all of that good stuff, all the stuff that's not good for you, right?
That's right. If you're really hungry when you go to the grocery store, you're probably going to spend more money because you're going to get some spur of the moment things that you would not even think about otherwise. But
exactly.
Also, it makes a big difference if you can buy things that are on sale, and you see those a lot. And sometimes you have to get there into the store to actually find out about those. But it's a good idea to look for as many things on sale as possible.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the food and the healthcare that we talked about, right, those definitely go hand in hand. I don't want to stray too far out of my area of expertise, right? I'm no nutritionist, but from what I've been told, if you take care of the food that's going into your body, meaning, hey, we're eating healthy, right? Things like that, that will not only help on the food expenses part of the equation, but also on the healthcare part of the equation as well.
Well, I think also when you're talking about grocery shopping, it really depends a lot on where you shop, because some stores are really expensive. Others, they're still expensive, but not nearly as much so.
As we've kind of walked through this, you see a lot of this stuff is kind of tied together, right? Where if you live somewhere that has a high cost of living, right? So your housing is more expensive, most of the time that goes out to everything, right? It's not just the housing is expensive. It's, hey, the food's a little bit more expensive, the gas is more expensive. All of that stuff is kind of tied together there. So if you're looking for somewhere to move in retirement, right, and you look for somewhere that has a low cost of living, you can bet that not just the housing, but a lot of the other stuff is also going to be tied into that. It can all kind of sound pretty elementary. But even if you make even modest changes in the 4 areas that we talked about today, you could definitely see your retirement dollars go further over time, which is crucial when we are no longer bringing in that paycheck, right? When we're on a fixed income. And in retirement, time is especially precious commodity, and money can help you enjoy that.
And one other thing I just wanted to mention here is, when you're going out to eat, and I'm just curious, how often do you guys go out to eat?
Oh boy, too much.
Yeah, same here, exactly. And one thing that lately we've realized is that sometimes you can actually split an entree, leave feeling just as satisfied. I mean,
absolutely.
It's plenty,
Absolutely.
And sometimes, even though we're not really good at leftovers, you can, take the leftovers home and have another meal the next day, maybe for lunch, the same thing. So you can save money in lots of ways. When you're retired, you think about these things. Many restaurants raise prices between lunch and dinner. So maybe if you go out to lunch, it won't cost you as much as going out to dinner.
Exactly. No, if you have the whole day free, right, that might end up being a better idea.
We've talked about 4 different categories of spending that really takes up the great majority of your money. Just kind of wrap it up for us and leave us with a thought, if you would, Chase.
Yeah, absolutely. Much like a lot of our shows here, right? Get with your financial professional. They'll be able to kind of help you build out and I don't even like the word budget, right? Because that implies that you can only spend a certain amount.
Yeah,
but
it usually has a negative connotation for sure.
Right. So just get with your financial professional, see exactly how much you're spending on each of these 4 items, and your financial professional will be able to help you build that into your plan so that once you do hit retirement, you can comfortably still pay for all of these things without changing your lifestyle too much.
Thank you so much, Chase. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today, and I know that all the listeners to this podcast probably got some good messages in there. Some things common sense, but sometimes it helps to point out things that we all don't think about too much specifically. So it's been my pleasure to hang out with you today.
Oh, thanks, Ron, as always. Always a pleasure.
Income, legacy, growth. It's all right here at ILG Financial. And it's all about helping you plan for retirement your way so you can achieve your financial goals. Call ILG Financial at 540-720-5656 or go online to ilgfinancial.com to learn more. This has been the Retire Your Way podcast with Chase Lopez of ILG Financial. I'm Ron Stutz. Thank you so much for listening. The information provided is for educational purposes only and is not intended as investment advice for any individual or entity. All information contained herein is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. The views presented today are those of Dave Lopez and do not necessarily represent the views of the Alpha Star Capital Management, LLC. The opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your financial professional before executing any financial strategy. Investment advisory services offered through Alpha Star Capital Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Alpha Star and ILG Financial, LLC are independent entities. SEC registration does not constitute an endorsement of the firm by the Commission, nor does it indicate that the advisor has attained a particular level of skill or ability.